History is not a straight line of progress, but a story full of erased chapters. We are about to journey through 20 unexplained ancient technologies that vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of impossible achievements. By the end, you will possess a completely new perspective on human ingenuity and the fragile nature of knowledge itself. How did a 2,000-year-old device predict eclipses with clockwork precision? And why could a simple clay jar hold the secret to ancient electricity? These are not myths, but tangible puzzles left on our doorstep by cultures long gone. What do you believe is the greatest invention we have already forgotten? A corroded lump of bronze and wood lay for 2,000 years, when sponge divers finally hauled it from a Roman shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. It seemed like just another piece of ancient junk. Yet this unassuming object, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, would become one of the most profound archaeological discoveries of all time, a ghost in the machine of history. It is, quite simply, the world's first known analog computer. Crafted around 100 years before the Common Era, its purpose was written in the stars. This intricate device, no larger than a shoebox, contained a maze of at least 30 precise bronze gears. When a hand crank was turned, these gears meshed together to move dials and pointers across several faces, predicting the complex dance of the heavens with a level of accuracy that would not be seen again in Europe for over a millennium. It could forecast lunar phases, track the paths of known planets, and even predict solar and lunar eclipses years in advance. One of its most fascinating functions was to calculate the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, merging celestial mechanics with the cultural heartbeat of the Greek world. For decades, its true complexity was hidden under centuries of calcified corrosion. It was not until researchers like historian Derek J. Dusola Price began meticulous X-ray and later CT scan analysis in the 1970s that the mechanism's genius was fully revealed. They discovered something extraordinary, a differential gear, a component so advanced it was thought to have been invented in the 16th century. This single piece of engineering rewrites our entire understanding of ancient technological capability. The Greeks of the Hellenistic period were not just philosophers and sculptors. They were master engineers who built a mechanical model of the universe. So who made it? While no name is attached, scholars suspect it may have come from the workshop of a genius like Archimedes or was influenced by his lost writings. Its purpose was likely educational, a demonstration device for wealthy patrons or a tool for astrologers to cast more accurate horoscopes, but its existence poses a haunting question. If this level of mechanical sophistication was possible in 100 BCE, what happened to that knowledge? The Antikythera Mechanism is a solitary survivor. No other device like it has ever been found from the ancient world. Its technology, a breathtaking fusion of astronomy, mathematics, and craftsmanship, seems to have vanished completely after the ship that carried it sank. It is a stark reminder that progress is not guaranteed, and that entire libraries of ingenuity can be lost to the tides of time, leaving behind only a single cryptic clue. While the Antikythera Mechanism was a symphony of moving parts, our next artifact whispers of a different kind of power, a silent and invisible force. In a museum in Baghdad rests a collection of the most unassuming objects, a small terracotta jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod. Individually, they are mundane. But together, they form the core of one of archaeology's most electrifying mysteries, the Baghdad Battery. Discovered in 1936 at a site near the modern city, These items date from the Parthian or Sasanian period, roughly 250 years before the Common Era to 250 years after. According to a theory first proposed seriously by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, this simple assembly might have been capable of a startling feat, generating a small electric current. The principle is straightforward. If the jar was filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or lemon juice, a chemical reaction would occur between the iron rod and the copper cylinder. This creates a basic galvanic cell, a primitive battery. Experiments with modern replicas have proven it works, producing a modest but measurable voltage, enough to cause a slight tingle or, as some enthusiasts have shown, to very dimly illuminate a small light bulb. So what was its purpose? The theories are as fascinating as the object itself. One compelling idea is electroplating, the process of using electricity to coat a base metal like silver with a thin layer of a precious metal like gold. Several gilded artifacts from the same period and region have been found, and while traditional fire gilding methods were known, a weak electrical current could have provided an alternative, more controlled technique. Other suggestions point to medicinal or religious use. Ancient texts from various cultures describe using electric fish to numb pain, so a controlled source of mild current might have been employed for therapeutic purposes. In a ritual context, the mysterious tingling sensation from holding the completed device could have been interpreted as a divine touch, a sacred secret for priests. Yet many mainstream scholars remain deeply skeptical. They argue the jar could simply have been a sealed storage container for sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper acting as protective roles. The lack of wires or conductors and the absence of any clear textual reference to such technology makes the battery hypothesis difficult to prove. This is the heart of the mystery. If it was a battery, it represents a flicker of understanding, a chance encounter with a fundamental force of nature that was never fully grasped or developed. Why did this spark of potential not ignite a technological revolution? Perhaps the current was too weak to be seen as practically useful beyond very niche applications. Maybe the knowledge was held by a small group of artisans or priests and was lost when their tradition died out. The Baghdad Battery, whether an ancient power cell or a mundane storage jar, forces us to confront a tantalizing possibility. It suggests that the path of discovery is not always linear, that brilliant insights can appear, be used in limited ways, and then vanish back into the dust for centuries, waiting for a future civilization to stumble upon them and wonder. Fire that water could not quench became the shield of an empire. For centuries, the naval forces of the Byzantine Empire commanded a terrifying weapon known as Greek fire, a secret so potent and so closely held that its true recipe vanished with the empire itself. Picture the scene from the deck of an enemy ship approaching Constantinople. From the Byzantine Droman warships, a strange tube would project not a solid missile, but a roaring stream of liquid flame. It would hit the water and continue to burn, spreading across the waves to cling to wooden hulls and sails, creating an inescapable inferno. Historical accounts, including those written by the Byzantine Emperor Leo VI in his military manual, describe it as being launched through bronze siphons, often accompanied by a thunderous roar and great clouds of smoke. The psychological effect was as devastating as the physical damage. To opposing sailors, it must have seemed like sorcery, a defiance of the natural order that water should put out fire. This was not simple flaming oil. Experts analyzing ancient descriptions believe its mysterious composition likely involved a base of crude petroleum or naphtha, drawn from natural surface wells in the region, mixed with other substances that allowed it to ignite on contact with water and burn with intense heat. Some theories suggest additions like quicklime, which reacts violently with water to generate heat, or sulfur and saltpeter, early precursors to gunpowder. Its strategic value was incalculable. Greek fire is credited with repeatedly saving Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, from naval assaults. A pivotal case was the Great Arab Siege of the city in the year 717. A massive fleet blockaded the city by sea, a critical threat. The deployment of Greek fire from the Byzantine ships broke the blockade, scattering and burning the invaders' vessels and turning the tide of the war. This victory preserved the empire for centuries more. The secret of its manufacture and deployment was guarded with a secrecy that seems extreme to us today. Knowledge was compartmentalized, reportedly confined to a single family, perhaps the imperial family itself. The components may have been produced in different locations and combined only at the moment of use. This obsessive secrecy was its ultimate weakness. When that custodial chain was finally broken, likely during the chaos of the Fourth Crusade and the sack of Constantinople in 1204, the formula was lost. Modern chemists and historians have tried to recreate it, producing substances that share some of its described properties, but no replica perfectly matches all the accounts from the chronicles. The loss of Greek fire is a profound lesson in the fragility of applied knowledge. It represents a pinnacle of military chemical engineering that emerged, served a vital purpose for hundreds of years, and then disappeared because the system designed to protect it was too successful. What other innovations from the ancient world were held in such tight, vulnerable hands? This disappearance points us toward a different kind of vanished technology, one not made of fire or metal, but carved from the very landscape itself. A blade could be judged not just by its edge, but by the story written in its metal. Damascus Steel swords bore a signature as unique as a fingerprint, a mesmerizing, swirling pattern like flowing water or rippled silk captured in the surface of the blade. For over 1,000 years, from roughly the 3rd to the 17th century, these weapons were the pinnacle of metallurgical art, forged in the workshops of the Middle East and legendary for their seemingly impossible combination of qualities. They were flexible enough to bend without breaking, yet could hold an edge so sharp it was said to slice a silk scarf drifting through the air or even cleave through another sword. The secret did not begin in Damascus but in the crucibles of India. The raw material was a special high-carbon steel known as woots, produced in small, ingot-like cakes that were traded along ancient routes. The genius of the Damascene smiths was in how they transformed this raw woots. Through a painstaking, closely guarded process involving repeated heating, forging, folding, and a very specific cycle of cooling, they unlocked the steel's hidden potential. Modern scientists, using tools like electron microscopes to examine surviving blades, have discovered something astonishing. Within that distinctive watery pattern lies a microstructure containing carbon nanotubes, incredibly strong formations at a microscopic scale that modern nanotechnology is only now beginning to master. These ancient artisans, working by eye and feel, were somehow engineering materials at the atomic level. The cultural impact was immense. In the Islamic world, a finely patterned Damascus blade was a symbol of status, power, and divine favor. For European crusaders who faced them in battle, they became objects of both terror and awe, inspiring countless legends. One famous tale speaks of the great Sultan Saladin demonstrating the sharpness of his sword by tossing a silk cushion into the air and letting the blade slice through it as it fell. Yet by the 18th century, the art was fading. The reasons for its disappearance are as complex as the forging process itself. Some historians point to the disruption of the trade routes that supplied the specific iron ores needed for Wootz steel. Others suggest that as warfare evolved, the meticulous artisanal production could not keep up with the demand for simpler, mass-produced weapons. The knowledge passed down from master to apprentice over generations was never formally documented. When that chain was broken, the exact alchemy of heat, timing, and technique vanished. Today, bladesmiths and metallurgists can create patterned steel that visually mimics the old Damascus, and through advanced analysis we understand some of its properties, but no modern replica has perfectly matched the legendary performance of the originals. This loss forces us to ask a profound question. What intuitive, hands-on mastery did those smiths possess that our precise scientific instruments struggle to reverse engineer? The story of Damascus Steel is a humbling reminder that some forms of knowledge are not just facts in a book, but are woven into the rhythm of a hammer, the color of a flame, and the practiced intuition of a human hand, all of which can be silenced by the march of time. This idea of a lost material science leads us to another ancient wonder, one that defies not the edge of a sword, but the very weight of stone itself. Pantheon's dome in Rome has stood without a single steel reinforcing bar for nearly 2,000 years, a silent testament to a forgotten mastery of materials. While our modern concrete bridges and parking garages often show alarming decay after just 50 years, Roman harbor walls, submerged in the corrosive Mediterranean Sea for 2 millennia, stand strong, even growing tougher with time. This is the mystery of Roman concrete, a durable marvel that outlasts the very civilization that built it. The Romans did not invent concrete, but they perfected it into an art form, using it from roughly 300 years before the Common Era to construct everything from aqueducts and roads to monumental structures like the Colosseum and that magnificent Pantheon dome, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Its secret was not in complexity, but in a brilliantly simple recipe that we abandoned. Modern Portland cement, developed in the 19th century, relies on a process that requires high heat and produces significant carbon emissions. Roman concrete was different and far more sustainable. Their formula mixed a slaked lime mortar with a special ingredient, volcanic ash, particularly a type found near the town of Pozzuoli. This ash, called pozzolana, was the magical component. When mixed with lime and water, it creates a paste that binds aggregate like rock and rubble. But the real genius is what happens next, especially in marine environments. For decades, scientists assumed the saltwater would weaken these ancient structures. Research led by geologists like Marie Jackson has revealed the opposite. When seawater seeps into Roman concrete, it triggers a slow, long-term chemical reaction. The lime and the pozzolana interact with the seawater to form rare, plate-like minerals that actually fill in cracks as they develop. In essence, the material heals itself. This is why the Roman harbor at Caesarea Maritima, for example, remains largely intact after 2,000 years of waves, while modern concrete breakwaters nearby have required constant and costly repair. The loss of this technology is a story of societal collapse, not forgotten blueprints. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the vast logistical networks needed to transport materials like pozzolana broke down. The knowledge held by engineers and builders faded as large-scale public works ceased. The recipe was not so much stolen as it was left behind, buried by the shifting priorities of a fractured world. Today, the quest to rediscover Roman concrete is driven by more than historical curiosity. Our modern concrete industry is a major contributor to global carbon emissions. The Roman formula offers a blueprint for a more durable, potentially carbon-neutral alternative. If we can fully decode and adapt this ancient technology, we could construct seawalls that strengthen with climate change, create buildings with lifespans measured in millennia instead of centuries, and dramatically reduce the environmental cost of construction. So why did we ever stop using it? The answer is a sobering lesson in the interconnectedness of civilization. Advanced technology often depends not just on knowledge, but on stable trade, specialized labor, and large-scale demand. When those pillars fall, the technology can vanish, waiting in plain sight for a future generation to recognize its value anew. This leads us to wonder what other architectural secrets were lost not to a single cataclysm, but to a slow fade from memory. Scattered across a vast, arid plateau in southern Peru lies a gallery of art so immense it can only be seen from the heavens. The Nazca Lines are a collection of hundreds of giant geoglyphs, figures etched directly into the desert floor by the ancient Nazca culture between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after. From the ground, they appear as shallow, meandering trails through the rust-colored gravel. But from the air, these lines resolve into breathtaking forms: a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a towering spider, a sinuous monkey with a coiled tail, and vast geometric shapes, trapezoids and spirals that stretch for miles. The precision is staggering. Some of the straight lines run perfectly for over 30 miles across the uneven terrain without deviating. The central mystery is as profound as the art itself. Why would a people create magnificent images they could never hope to see in their entirety? The method of construction was surprisingly low-tech, yet required immense coordination. The Nazca people carefully removed the top layer of dark, sun-baked stones and pebbles to reveal the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This contrast created the lines, and the dry, windless climate of the Nazca Desert has preserved them for over 1,000 years. The real feat was the planning. Without aerial views or advanced surveying tools, how did they scale up their designs with such accuracy? Researchers believe they likely used a system of stakes and ropes, scaling up small master plans through a simple but effective grid system, a testament to their sophisticated understanding of geometry and spatial organization. Theories about their purpose are as varied as the figures themselves. A leading idea, championed by archaeologists like Johann Reinhard, connects the lines to a desperate need for water. In this incredibly dry landscape, the geoglyphs may have been a form of ritual prayer, a way to communicate with deities believed to control rain and fertility in the mountains. Many lines point toward distant sources of water, and the animal figures, like the hummingbird or the whale, could be symbols of life and abundance. Other theories suggest astronomical alignments, with some lines pointing to solstice sunrises or significant star positions. More speculative ideas, popular in the mid-20th century, proposed they were landing strips for ancient visitors from other worlds, though this has been widely dismissed by scholars due to a lack of any supporting evidence. The modern story of their discovery adds to their mystique. While local people had always known of the lines, the world only took notice in the 1920s when the first commercial airlines began flying over the desert. Pilots looked down and reported seeing what they first thought were ancient irrigation ditches, only to realize they formed coherent, giant pictures. This aerial perspective ignited global fascination. Today, researchers use satellite imagery and drones to map and study the lines in unprecedented detail, revealing new figures and gaining insights into their construction sequence. Yet this fame brings peril. Preservation is a constant challenge. While the climate has protected them for centuries, modern threats like illegal mining, off-road vehicle tracks, and even well-meaning but damaging tourist foot traffic pose serious risks. The lines are a fragile legacy etched into the earth. Their disappearance as a cultural practice is another layer of the puzzle. When the Nazca culture declined, likely due to environmental changes and social upheaval, the knowledge and ritual imperative behind these vast earthworks faded away. We are left with a haunting question. What profound belief system, what communal vision, was powerful enough to mobilize generations to create art for an audience they believed was watching from above, but could never be themselves? This mystery of ancient landscape-scale communication leads us to consider other cultures that encoded their knowledge not in the earth, but in the very stones of their cities, aligning them with the cosmos itself. Deep in the jungles of Costa Rica, workers clearing land for banana plantations in the 1930s uncovered something that defied explanation: Buried in the soil were enormous stone spheres, some as small as a child's ball, others taller than a person and weighing over 15 tons. These are the stone spheres of the Diquis Delta, nearly perfect orbs crafted by pre-Columbian peoples between 600 and 1500 years after the Common Era. Their surfaces are unnervingly smooth, their shapes so geometrically precise that when first discovered, many refused to believe they were made by human hands at all. They are carved from a single piece of hard stone, primarily a volcanic rock called gabbro, though some are made from limestone or sandstone. The level of craftsmanship is astonishing. Studies using modern measuring tools have confirmed that many of the spheres are within millimeters of being perfect spheres, a feat that would challenge even contemporary sculptors with powered tools. So how was it done? Archaeologists and stonemasons experimenting with traditional methods propose a multi-stage process that reveals a deep, patient understanding of materials. The first step was likely finding a suitable boulder. Artisans may have used controlled fires to heat the stone's surface, then rapidly cooled it with water, causing layers to crack and flake away, roughing out a rounded form. Then came the meticulous finishing work. Using hammerstones made of a harder material, they would have pecked away at the surface, followed by endless hours of grinding and polishing with sand and water, slowly coaxing the stone into its flawless spherical shape. This was not a quick endeavor, but a monumental investment of time and communal effort. The mystery deepens when we look at their placement. At preserved archaeological sites like Finca 6, the spheres are not randomly scattered. They are found arranged in lines, triangles, or parallelograms, often aligned with the cardinal directions or with other significant landscape features. This deliberate patterning suggests they were far more than decorative objects. One compelling theory posits they were celestial markers, their alignments pointing to solstice sunrises or the positions of important stars, serving as a kind of permanent astronomical calendar etched into the landscape. Another view sees them as symbols of power and social status. The spheres, requiring vast labor to create and move, could have represented the authority of a chief or a community, displayed prominently in plazas or along pathways to ceremonial centers. Their grouping might have mapped social hierarchies or clan relationships in stone. Tragically, the very moment of their modern discovery put them at immense risk. As news spread, many spheres were looted from their original sites, rolled away by treasure hunters, or simply moved to adorn the gardens of private homes and government buildings. Agricultural machinery damaged others, and the context of their placement, so crucial to understanding their purpose, was often irrevocably lost. Today, their significance is recognized globally, with several key sites designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Area protecting what remains. Yet, the essential questions linger. What specific rituals or beliefs were these perfect spheres meant to embody? How did the knowledge of their precise manufacture, passed down through generations of master carvers, completely vanish after European contact? They stand as silent, polished monuments to a geometric ideal, a puzzle of artistry whose cultural instructions have been erased. This loss of sculptural technology compels us to look for other ancient wonders where form and function merged into something both beautiful and utterly perplexing, leading us to a city where the stones themselves seem to have been softened like clay. A book that refuses to be read is a unique kind of ghost. In the rare books library of Yale University rests a volume that has defied understanding for over 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript. Its 240 vellum pages are covered in an elegant, looping script that belongs to no known language, accompanied by illustrations that are both meticulous and deeply strange. There are plants with bulbous roots and fantastical leaves that match no known species, intricate astronomical diagrams showing unfamiliar constellations, and pages filled with what appear to be small, nude women bathing in a system of interconnected green pools and tubes. This is not a simple puzzle. It is a complete and coherent visual universe rendered in ink, yet its meaning is utterly locked away. The manuscript takes its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who acquired it in 1912 from a collection in Italy. Since then, it has passed through the hands of scholars, codebreakers, and intelligence agencies, including American and British cryptanalysts from both world wars who cracked enemy ciphers but found this ancient book impenetrable. Scientific analysis has confirmed its age, carbon dating the vellum to the early 15th century in northern Italy, but this only deepens the mystery. What was its purpose? One prominent theory sees it as an elaborate herbal or medical text. The many plant drawings suggest a pharmacopoeia, but if so, it documents a botany of the imagination. The bathing nymphs could illustrate a medieval concept of balneology, the study of therapeutic baths, while the astrological sections might link herbal remedies to celestial cycles, a common practice at the time. Another compelling idea frames it as a work of proto-science, perhaps related to alchemy, encoding processes for creating medicines or tinctures in a secret language to protect valuable trade knowledge. The writing itself is the central enigma. Statistical analysis of the text shows it has patterns consistent with a real language, with word lengths and character frequencies that are not random. Yet, every proposed key, from simple substitution ciphers to complex linguistic codes, has failed to produce a sensible translation. Some researchers have suggested it is a constructed language, or even an early form of shorthand, while a controversial minority argue it could be an elaborate, centuries-old hoax designed to fool a wealthy patron. The hoax theory is challenged by the sheer, consistent effort involved, every page densely and carefully filled, suggesting a genuine intent to communicate. The manuscript's allure is heightened by its possible royal and scholarly connections. It once belonged to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a noted patron of the occult sciences, and earlier ownership may trace back to the English medieval thinker Roger Bacon, a man fascinated by cryptography and experimental science. This pedigree suggests it was considered a work of profound importance in its time, not a curiosity. Today, high-resolution digital scans are available to the public, inviting amateur and professional cryptographers worldwide to try their hand, yet the book guards its secrets as tightly as ever. It stands as the ultimate literary cold case, a stark reminder that the written word, our primary tool for preserving knowledge, can become an indecipherable wall if the key is lost. What forgotten branch of herbal wisdom or cosmological understanding might be contained within its pages? The Voynich Manuscript is a haunting testament to the fact that knowledge is not just information. It is information plus context, and when that context vanishes, even the most carefully recorded book can become a beautiful, baffling artifact of silence. Far from the tangled jungles of Costa Rica, another stone mystery rises from the waves of the Pacific. On one of the most isolated islands on Earth, the silent, watchful faces of the Moai stand guard. These colossal stone statues of Easter Island, carved by the Rapa Nui people between roughly 1250 and 1500 years after the Common Era, are monuments to an ambition that still staggers the mind. Each figure, hewn from compressed volcanic ash called tuff, can weigh up to 82 tons and stand over 30 feet tall. Their creation at the Rono Raraku quarry was a feat of artistry, but the true, vanished technology lies in how they traveled. How did a society with no wheels, no large animals, and no metal tools move these giants across miles of rugged, hilly terrain to ceremonial platforms along the coast? The answer may be found not in complex machinery, but in a profound understanding of physics and coordinated human effort. For decades, the prevailing theory involved log rollers, with statues laid on sledges and pulled over a path of felled trees. This idea, however, contributed to a tragic narrative of ecological suicide. suggesting the Rapa Nui recklessly deforested their entire island to move statues, leading to collapse. More recent archaeological work by researchers like Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo challenges that story. They propose a method that seems almost alive, that the statues were walked. Oral traditions had long hinted at this, speaking of the Moai moving with mana, or spiritual power. Inspired by this, experimental archaeologists put the idea to the test. In a compelling 2012 experiment, a team used 3 strong ropes and 18 people. One set of ropes was attached to the top of a replica Moai, pulling it forward, while 2 other teams on either side rocked the statue from side to side. With each coordinated rock and pull, the multi-ton figure appeared to sway or walk upright across the landscape. This method, far more efficient than dragging, aligns with the wear patterns found on ancient roads and the statues themselves. It reveals a lost logistical science, a rhythmic, communal engineering where chance and coordinated pulls turned a monolithic block into a staggering, forward-moving giant. The cultural drive behind this immense effort was profound. The Moai were not mere decorations, they were sacred representations of deified ancestors. Their placement on stone platforms called ahu, facing inland to watch over the living communities, created a powerful spiritual landscape. Erecting a massive Moai was an act of connection, bringing the protective gaze of the forebears directly into the heart of daily life. Yet this tradition did cease. The reasons are complex and intertwined with the island's ecological history. While the walking method used fewer logs, deforestation did occur over centuries, driven by the arrival of invasive rats that ate tree seeds and the needs of a growing population. As resources changed, the social order likely shifted. The energy required for statue transport and erection may have become unsustainable, and competing clan groups may have turned from building Moai to a new practice, the Birdman cult competition. The statues were gradually abandoned, many left unfinished in the quarry or toppled during periods of conflict. Today, restoration projects have re-erected several ahu, allowing us to witness the Moai's intended grandeur. Their silent presence asks us 2 reflective questions. What deep, intuitive mastery of balance and collective action did the Rapa Nui possess, a mastery that turned rock into a rhythmic procession? And what does their story tell us about the delicate balance between monumental cultural expression and the environment that sustains it? This puzzle of moving mountains shifts our focus from sheer mass to another kind of ancient mastery, one that sought not to conquer weight, but to manipulate the very flow of time and water with breathtaking precision. Deep within the crypts of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a stone carving has ignited a modern debate as charged as the phenomenon it supposedly depicts. Etched into a wall around 100 years before the Common Era, the so-called Dendera light relief shows a strange and compelling scene. A large, bulbous object, reminiscent of a modern glass light bulb, is held aloft by a pillar. Inside, a snake extends along its length, its head touching the narrow end of the bulb. A cable-like cord runs from the base of the object to a box, beside which stands a kneeling figure, while a baboon-like god holds 2 knives at the ready. To the modern eye, the interpretation seems startlingly obvious. An ancient Egyptian light bulb, complete with a filament and a power source. This image has become a cornerstone for alternative history theories, suggesting the Egyptians possessed a form of electrical technology lost to time. The visual parallel is undeniably striking, and it forces us to ask a critical question: how do we interpret an ancient symbol through a modern lens? To understand this carving, we must step into the symbolic world of its creators. Mainstream Egyptologists, including scholars like Dr. Bolko Stern, provide a very different reading rooted in mythology, not machinery. They explain that the scene is a rich depiction of a creation myth. The bulbous shape is not a glass enclosure but a lotus flower, a powerful symbol of rebirth and creation in Egyptian belief. The snake inside represents the god Harsomptus, a serpent deity associated with life force and regeneration, emerging from the lotus at the moment of creation. The cord is not an electrical cable but a lotus stem, and the box is a divine pedestal. The baboon god is likely Hapi, one of the 4 sons of Horus, and the knives are for protection, warding off chaos. This entire tableau is a cosmological diagram, a story in stone about the birth of the world from the primordial waters, using imagery that would have been instantly recognizable to an ancient Egyptian priest. The temple complex at Dendera itself supports this symbolic interpretation. It is famously aligned with celestial events, its ceiling adorned with a magnificent zodiac and designed to chart the cycles of the heavens. The crypt where this relief is found was a sacred, restricted space for ritual, not a workshop for technological display. When we examine the physical evidence of daily life in ancient Egypt, we find no supporting artifacts for electrical technology, no wires, no batteries in a dynastic context, no switches or sockets. Their advanced lighting solutions were brilliantly practical, oil lamps with wicks, and the use of reflective metal surfaces to amplify their glow, a technology perfectly suited to their materials and needs. The dangers of anachronistic thinking become clear here. It is a natural human tendency to project our own technological framework onto the past, to see a light bulb because that is a fundamental part of our world. This can lead us to overlook the deeper, more culturally specific meaning an artifact held for its own people. The Dendera carving is a masterclass in symbolic storytelling, not an electrical schematic. Yet, the myth of the Dendera light has taken on a life of its own in popular culture, even inspiring fringe claims that early pioneers of the electric light bulb, like Thomas Edison, were influenced by such ancient motifs. While there is no credible evidence for this, the persistence of the idea speaks to a powerful human desire to find echoes of our own ingenuity in the distant past, to believe that brilliant flashes of insight can appear, vanish, and reappear across the ages. This debate ultimately serves as a crucial lesson in historical interpretation. It challenges us to sit with the discomfort of not having a simple, modern answer. The real technology on display at Dendera is not electrical engineering, but the sophisticated technology of myth, a system for encoding complex philosophical and spiritual ideas into visual form, a system whose full nuance we may never completely recover. How many other ancient carvings do we misinterpret because we are looking for machines when we should be learning to read their symbolic language? This question of misinterpretation leads us to a find that is not symbolic at all, but terrifyingly literal, a set of skulls that reveal a medical knowledge far ahead of its time. Metallurgy achieved a quiet miracle in the heart of ancient India. The iron pillar of Delhi does not look like a marvel at first glance. It is a simple, smooth column of wrought iron, standing just over 7 meters tall in the Quad complex. Yet its true wonder lies in what has not happened. Forged around the year 400 of the Common Era, during the reign of the Gupta Empire's King Chandragupta II, this pillar has resisted the relentless assault of rust for over 1600 years, a feat that defies the very nature of its material. In a humid, monsoon-prone climate where modern steel structures require constant maintenance, this ancient iron sentinel stands virtually untouched by corrosion. The secret is not magic, but a breathtakingly sophisticated understanding of materials, a recipe that seems to have vanished from common practice. Modern scientific analysis, using techniques like X-ray fluorescence, has unlocked its secret. The pillar is made from remarkably pure iron, but its genius lies in an unexpected additive, phosphorus. The ancient smiths, likely using a unique forge welding technique with high phosphorus content charcoal, created a metal with an unusually high phosphorus content and a very low sulfur content. This specific chemistry allows the pillar's surface to react with oxygen and moisture to form a thin, stable film called a passive layer. This layer, only microns thick, acts as an invisible, self-healing shield, preventing the deeper, destructive rust that consumes ordinary iron. It is a perfect example of ancient nanotechnology, engineered long before the concept existed. The pillar itself is a historical document. A 6-line Sanskrit inscription, still clearly legible, praises the valor and conquests of a king named Chandra, widely identified as Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. It originally stood elsewhere, possibly at a site called Vishnupadagiri, associated with the Hindu god Vishnu, and was moved to its current location centuries later. Its original purpose was likely commemorative, a standard of victory or a flagstaff before a grand temple, a symbol of imperial power crafted to last for the ages. Today, that longevity faces a new threat: modern atmospheric pollution. Acidic compounds from vehicle exhaust and industrial emissions are slowly degrading the protective passive layer, causing minor pitting and staining near the base. This has spurred urgent conservation efforts by archaeologists and materials scientists, who monitor its condition and study ways to shield it without altering its ancient surface. When compared to other surviving ancient iron artifacts, from European Viking swords to Chinese castings, the Delhi pillar is in a class of its own for its size, purity, and corrosion resistance. It stands as a silent, towering testament to the pinnacle of Indian metallurgical skill, a skill documented in later texts but never quite replicated on this scale again. So why did this rust-defying technology not become the standard? The answer may lie in the very process that created it. The high phosphorus iron, while brilliantly corrosion-resistant, is also more brittle. It would have been perfect for a stationary, decorative pillar, but less suitable for tools or weapons that needed to withstand impact. The knowledge may have been specialized, held by guilds of smiths serving royal patrons for specific ceremonial projects. As empires fell and patronage networks dissolved, the precise art of creating such perfect, passive iron may have faded, surviving only in this one magnificent prototype. It prompts us to reflect: what other industrial recipes, perfectly suited for a specific monumental task, have we lost because they were not adaptable to everyday use? This pillar is not just a relic of iron, it is a relic of intent, built not just to stand but to endure as a declaration across centuries. That drive to create the indestructible leads us to another material mystery, one not of metal but of stone, and a civilization that built with blocks so massive their construction seems to defy every law of physics we know. The seamless joints of Sacsayhuamán defy belief, a fortress where stone seems to flow into stone. High above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, Peru, this monumental complex was constructed in the 15th century, its walls a breathtaking display of a lost architectural science. The most iconic sections are composed of colossal limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, cut with such geometric precision that they fit together without any mortar. The joints are so tight, so perfectly interlocked, that for centuries it has been said not even a razor blade can slip between them. This is not an exaggeration. Modern visitors still test the claim, finding the stone surfaces fused as if by some impossible, ancient magic. The true magic, however, was a combination of staggering labor, profound patience, and a technical knowledge that vanished with the empire. How did a civilization without iron tools, the wheel, or draft animals achieve such a feat? The process began at the quarry. Using harder stone hammers, workers would pound along a desired fracture line, slowly splitting the bedrock. Once a rough block was freed, the real artistry began. The shaping was achieved through a technique called corbelling. Craftsmen would use smaller hammerstones to peck away at the surface, gradually refining the shape. To achieve the final, mirror-perfect fit, They likely employed abrasives like sand and water, grinding the surfaces against each other for an interminable length of time, essentially sanding the stones together until they locked seamlessly. The organizational scale was immense. This was a society built on a labor system called mitre, where communities contributed work as a form of tax to the state. Thousands of skilled and unskilled workers would have been coordinated in a symphony of hauling, carving, and fitting, moving these giants up steep slopes using earthen ramps, ropes, and sheer human force. The design of the walls themselves reveals a genius beyond mere construction. The famous zigzag pattern, resembling the teeth of a giant stone serpent, was not just visually striking, it was a formidable defensive innovation. This shape meant attackers approaching the walls would be exposed to fire from multiple angles, with no safe place to hide. Furthermore, the entire complex is believed to have held deep astronomical significance, aligned with solstices and celestial events, merging the practical with the sacred. Spanish chroniclers who witnessed the site in its prime were awestruck, and their accounts fueled enduring legends. One persistent tale speaks of a mysterious plant, a juice or sap that could soften stone, allowing the Inca to mold the blocks like clay. While no evidence supports this, and experiments have failed to replicate it, the legend persists as a metaphor for a technology so advanced to European eyes it seemed supernatural. The true tragedy lies in the disruption that followed. The Spanish conquest in the 16th century shattered the Inca social and political order. The master architects, the engineers who held the precise knowledge of measurement systems, quarrying logistics, and fitting techniques, were lost. The mitre system was dismantled and repurposed for colonial mines. The living tradition of this megalithic masonry died. When we compare Sacsayhuamán to other Inca masterpieces like Machu Picchu or Ollantaytambo, we see the same principles of precise, mortarless fitting, a signature style across the empire. But Sacsayhuamán represents its most monumental and militarily sophisticated expression. The stones ask us a humbling question. What intuitive understanding of geometry, friction, and collective effort allowed them to solve a puzzle we would need computers and diamond-tipped saws to approach today? This was not just building, it was a form of three-dimensional stone knitting, a technology that created structures resilient to the earthquakes that frequently shake the Andes. Their secret was not in a single tool, but in a complete cultural system of knowledge, one that evaporated when that culture was forcibly transformed, leaving behind only these silent, immovable puzzles for us to ponder. Buried in the ashes of a Minoan palace, a small clay disc holds a message no one can read. The Phaistos Disc, unearthed in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia at the ancient site of Phaistos on Crete, is a compact, palm-sized artifact that has become one of the world's most famous and frustrating linguistic puzzles. Dating to the Middle Minoan Bronze Age, around 1700 years before the Common Era, its surface is covered on both sides with a continuous spiral of stamped symbols, 241 in total, arranged in clearly defined groups. These are not hand-drawn markings, but impressions made by pressing pre-formed seals into the soft clay, a method of production that makes it utterly unique in the ancient world. This was not a casual inscription, it was a deliberate, reproducible act of communication, a form of printing that predates movable type by over 3,000 years. The symbols themselves are a captivating gallery of Bronze Age life, pictograms of human heads with feathery headdresses, walking men, women in skirts, shields and spears, ships, birds, fish, and various tools and plants. They feel familiar, yet their specific meaning is locked away. The very method of its creation deepens the mystery. Using individual punches for each symbol suggests a system that was meant to be used repeatedly, perhaps for official documents, religious texts, or even labels for trade goods. Yet no other example of this script has ever been found, not on clay, not on stone, not on any fragment anywhere. It is a complete anomaly, a single page from a book whose entire library has vanished. This isolation has fueled a century of intense and ultimately fruitless decipherment attempts. Scholars have tried to link it to Linear A, the still undeciphered script used by the Minoans for administrative purposes, but the symbols do not match. Others have proposed connections to ancient Anatolian or even early Greek languages, but without a bilingual text or a longer corpus of writing to compare it to, every theory hits a dead end. The disc has become a Rorschach test for the imagination, inspiring claims that it is a hymn to a mother goddess, a list of soldiers or supplies, an ancient board game, or an astronomical calendar tracking the cycles of the moon. Its archaeological context offers little help. It was found in a basement room of the Phaistos Palace complex, a setting that could point to a storeroom, an archive, or a ritual space, but the evidence is inconclusive. The palace itself was destroyed not long after the disc was made, possibly by an earthquake or invasion, and the knowledge of how to read its stamped message may have perished in that collapse. This leads us to a profound and unsettling possibility. What if the Phaistos disc represents not a mainstream writing system, but a highly specialized one? Perhaps it was the exclusive tool of a specific guild of priests, merchants, or palace officials, a kind of coded shorthand that died with its small circle of users. Its very efficiency, the use of reusable seals, might have been its downfall if the need for that specific type of record-keeping disappeared with a change in political power or trade routes. The disc stands as a stark monument to a dual loss: the loss of the language it encodes and the loss of the technology it demonstrates. It whispers of a society advanced enough to conceptualize movable type, yet leaves us with only this one silent prototype. What crucial piece of Minoan history, what prayer, law, or story is coiled in that baked clay spiral? We may never know, and that is its enduring power, a reminder that some doors to the past remain closed, not for lack of trying, but because the key was melted down long ago. This profound silence of a lost script shifts our focus from symbols stamped in clay to a landscape where the very earth was carved into a machine of time and seasons. A bronze vessel with 8 dragons stood ready to sense the tremors of the earth. In the year 132 of the Common Era, during China's illustrious Han Dynasty, the brilliant court astronomer and engineer Zhang Heng presented the emperor with an invention that seemed to border on prophecy: the world's first seismoscope. Historical records describe a magnificent bronze jar, perhaps as tall as a person, adorned around its circumference with 8 dragon heads. Each dragon held a bronze ball in its mouth, and below each dragon, a corresponding bronze toad sat with its own mouth agape, waiting. The principle was as elegant as it was mysterious. When an earthquake occurred, even one too distant to be felt at the capital, one of the dragons would release its ball. The ball would clatter into the mouth of the toad below, producing a loud sound to alert observers and clearly indicating the compass direction from which the seismic waves had originated. The court history records a stunning demonstration. One day, a dragon dropped its ball, though no shaking was felt in the palace. Days later, a messenger arrived from a region hundreds of kilometers away reporting a major earthquake, precisely from the direction the device had indicated. The court was astonished, and Zhang Heng's genius was cemented. But how did it work? The internal mechanism was never documented in detail, and the original device is long lost, leaving modern engineers and historians to piece together its secrets from textual clues. The leading theory, supported by successful modern reconstructions, involves an ingenious inverted pendulum. Inside the jar, a heavy mass was likely suspended from a flexible rod or set of levers. When seismic waves arrived, they would cause the mass to swing, acting like a modern seismometer's weighted bob. This motion would trigger a clever linkage system, pushing open the mouth of just one dragon aligned with the quake's direction while leaving the other 7 firmly shut. This directional specificity is what separates it from a simple vibration alarm. It was a true instrument for measurement. Zhang Heng was a true polymath in an era of remarkable inquiry. He also crafted a sophisticated water-powered armillary sphere to map the stars and developed early theories about lunar eclipses. His seismoscope did not emerge from a vacuum, but from the advanced scientific culture of the Han Dynasty, a period that valued astronomical observation, hydraulic engineering, and precise calendar making for both practical governance and understanding the mandate of heaven. The device served a critical practical need. China, then as now, sits on active fault lines, and early warning of earthquakes, even if only directional, was vital for an empire to dispatch aid, assess damage, and maintain stability. It was a tool of statecraft as much as science. Yet, after the Han Dynasty's eventual collapse and the ensuing centuries of fragmentation, the precise knowledge of its construction faded. Later Chinese scholars wrote about the device with admiration, but no functioning copies from antiquity survive. Modern attempts to build working replicas based on the pendulum theory have shown it is mechanically plausible, capable of detecting the direction of simulated quakes in lab settings. This success makes its disappearance all the more poignant, so we are left with 2 reflective questions. What intuitive grasp of mechanics and vibration allowed Zhang Heng to design such an effective instrument without any underlying theory of plate tectonics or wave propagation? And perhaps more hauntingly, why did this brilliant beginning not continuously evolve into a sustained science of seismology? The answer may lie in the very context that created it. The Seismoscope was a masterpiece, but it was also a singular artifact of a specific imperial court, without a broader, institutionalized scientific community to build upon its principles, document experiments, and teach successive generations. Its technology remained a marvel rather than a foundation. It stands as a ghost in the history of science, a clear signal that sophisticated measurement is possible, only for the method of measurement itself to be swallowed by time. This pattern of a single, brilliant prototype points us toward another ancient innovation, one that sought not to measure the Earth's movements, but to navigate its most trackless expanse, the open sea. A single man moved mountains of coral under the cover of night. In the humid landscape of early 20th century Florida, an unassuming Latvian immigrant named Edward Līdzkalnis embarked on a solitary quest that would produce one of the modern world's most baffling construction mysteries, the Coral Castle. Working entirely alone from the 1920s into the 40s, Līdzkalnis single-handedly quarried, carved, and positioned over 1,100 tons of oolitic limestone, a local coral rock, creating a complex of massive sculptures, walls, and functional objects. Some of these blocks weigh upwards of 30 tons, each one a weight that would typically require a crew of skilled workers and heavy machinery. Yet Līdzkalnis, a man barely 5 feet tall and weighing only 100 pounds, insisted he did it all by himself, often working at night to shield his methods from prying eyes. He claimed he had rediscovered the building secrets of the ancient Egyptians and the pyramid builders, a statement that transforms his garden from a quirky folk art project into a profound and personal experiment in lost knowledge. So how did he do it? Engineers and skeptics who have studied the site propose he must have used simple, clever applications of fundamental physics. The tools found on the property after his passing were rudimentary: chains, blocks, metal bars, and homemade tripods. With these, experts speculate he could have employed a system of high tripods, block and tackle, and meticulous levering. By using a fulcrum point and a long lever arm, even a small person can move an immense weight with enough patience, incrementally rocking a stone onto rollers or a sled. One of the most famous features of the castle demonstrates this mastery of balance, a 9-ton stone gate that is so perfectly balanced on a metal shaft and bearing that a child can push it open with a single finger. It rotated smoothly for decades, only seizing up in the 1980s, and when engineers finally removed it to repair the mechanism, they discovered its precision was astounding. The pivot point was a simple truck bearing, but the stone itself had been drilled with a perfectly centered hole. Leedskalnin's own writings, a series of cryptic pamphlets on topics from magnetism to domestic advice, add layers of mystery. He spoke frequently about understanding the secrets of magnetism and the forces that hold matter together. This has fueled more speculative theories that he somehow tapped into anti-gravity or geomagnetic energy, ideas for which there is no scientific evidence but which speak to the profound sense of wonder his work inspires. A pivotal moment in the castle's story underscores his determination. In the mid-1930s, when he learned of potential development near his original homestead site, Leedskalnin took on his most staggering logistical feat. He reportedly rented a truck and over several weeks single-handedly moved his entire castle, every multi-ton stone, 10 miles north to its current location in what is now the city of Homestead. He accomplished this with the same secretive, nocturnal methods, leaving no witnesses to his process. Today, the Coral Castle is a beloved and bewildering tourist attraction, a testament to one man's obsessive vision. The reflective questions it poses are deeply compelling. Did Edward Leedskalnin, through sheer intuition and trial and error, genuinely rediscover and apply the same principles of counterweight, balance, and mechanical advantage that ancient megalithic builders used? Or does his story highlight something else, the incredible potential of focused human ingenuity, even in an industrial age, to achieve what seems impossible with minimal tools? His castle is a modern monument to a very ancient puzzle, proving that the line between forgotten technology and determined, solitary genius can be beautifully, mysteriously thin. This notion of a single keeper of secrets leads us to consider a far older and grander complex, one where the stones themselves are aligned to capture the light of the cosmos on a single, sacred day. A story emerges from the mountains of China that blurs the line between archaeology and science fiction. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te reportedly discovered a series of tombs in the remote Bayan-Ha Mountains. Within these tombs, he allegedly found the skeletal remains of unusually small beings and, more curiously, hundreds of stone discs, each with a hole in its center and a fine groove spiraling from the hole to the outer edge. These became known as the Dropa Stones. The tale, as it later unfolded, grew far stranger. According to sensational accounts that surfaced decades later, these grooves were not decorative, but actually microscopic hieroglyphic inscriptions. When translated by a professor named Tsum Nui, the inscriptions supposedly told an astonishing story of a spacecraft from a distant star that crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. The stranded beings, the Dropa, could not repair their ship and were eventually killed by hostile local tribes. This narrative transformed the stones from simple artifacts into potential proof of ancient alien contact, a cornerstone of the ancient astronaut theory. The story first reached a wide Western audience through a German magazine article in the 1960s, and from there, it took on a life of its own in books and documentaries dedicated to alternative history. It is a compelling saga filled with the allure of a decoded message from the stars, yet when we look for solid evidence, the entire structure begins to crumble. No credible archaeological journal has ever published Kai Pu-te's findings. The professor who allegedly translated the texts, Tsum Nui, appears in no academic records. Most damningly, the physical stones themselves have never been produced for independent scientific examination by any major museum or research institution. Skeptical researchers, including archaeologists and historians, have proposed far more grounded explanations. The discs are likely misidentified Neolithic by discs, common jade artifacts from ancient China used in ceremonial contexts. These by discs are flat stones with a central hole, but they do not contain spiral grooves or microscopic writing. The entire story bears the hallmarks of an elaborate fabrication, possibly born from a combination of mistranslation, imaginative speculation, and outright invention. Further layers of the myth include claims that members of a local tribe, the Ham, possess unique genetic traits as descendants of the Dropa aliens. Investigations by geneticists and anthropologists have found no such abnormalities, and the Ham people are recognized as a distinct ethnic group with a long history in the region, unrelated to any fanciful extraterrestrial lineage. So why does this tale, despite being thoroughly debunked by mainstream science, continue to captivate so many? It speaks to a powerful human impulse. When we confront a gap in the historical record, a technology or achievement that seems out of place, there is a temptation to fill that void with extraordinary explanations. The Dropa Stones narrative offers a simple, dramatic answer to complex questions about human origins and lost knowledge. It transforms an unknown into a thrilling cosmic mystery. This enduring allure provides us with a crucial reflective lens. What does our fascination with such stories reveal about our relationship with the past? Perhaps they highlight a deep-seated hope that we are not alone in the universe, or a desire to believe that our ancestors witnessed wonders beyond our current understanding. More pragmatically, they serve as a cautionary reminder of the importance of evidence and rigorous scrutiny. In a world overflowing with information, the story of the Dropa Stones teaches us to cherish genuine mystery while carefully distinguishing it from manufactured myth. It underscores that the real wonder of history often lies not in imagined alien interventions, but in the profound, yet entirely human, ingenuity that actually built our world, an ingenuity sometimes so advanced it feels alien to us in retrospect. Gold can hold the shape of a dream or perhaps a memory of flight. In museum cases far from each other, small artifacts from ancient Egypt and pre-Columbian Colombia whisper a tantalizing possibility. These are objects that, to the modern eye, look unmistakably like airplanes. From the Quimbaya culture of Colombia, dated to around 1,000 years after the Common Era, come delicate gold figurines often called the Quimbaya airplanes. They feature delta-shaped wings, upright tail fins, and streamlined fuselages, a silhouette that would not look out of place in a display of modern jet models. Similarly, from a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt, comes a sycamore wood model discovered in 1898, shaped like a bird but with a distinct, straight wing that resembles an aircraft airfoil more than a bird's tapered wing. When we see them, the resemblance is so immediate it feels like a shock, a glitch in the timeline. This visual echo has sparked a vibrant debate that sits at the fascinating intersection of archaeology, aerodynamics, and human psychology. Are these proof of lost aviation knowledge, or are we seeing what we want to see? The first step is to look closely at the artifacts themselves. The Quimbaya figurines, part of a larger collection of gold objects depicting animals and people, are typically just a few inches long. Mainstream archaeology has long classified them as stylized representations of insects, like beetles or bees, or perhaps stylized birds. The features we interpret as wings and tail fins could easily be an artist's abstraction of insect anatomy or the flowing forms of a bird in motion. The Egyptian Saqqara bird, as it is known, also fits comfortably within the tradition of bird models commonly placed in tombs as spiritual symbols, yet the design is peculiar. Its wing is flat on the bottom and rounded on the top, a shape that generates lift, a principle formerly understood only in the last century or so. This peculiarity prompted serious investigation. In the late 1960s, a doctor and model plane enthusiast named Kolul Messiha studied the Saqqara bird and became convinced it represented a model glider. His advocacy led to its display in the Cairo Museum's Central Hall, labeled as a model plane. Even more compelling were later tests. In the 1990s, aerodynamics experts built scale replicas of both the Saqqara bird and some Quimbaya figurines. When launched with a small motor or catapult, these replicas, with only minor adjustments for balance, demonstrated stable gliding flight. They flew. This empirical result is undeniably provocative. It suggests that whether by accident or by intent, the shapes crafted by these ancient artisans inherently contain sound aerodynamic principles. The artifacts function as airfoils, so does this mean the Quimbaya or the Egyptians had aviation? Almost certainly not in the way we imagine. There is a vast chasm between a small, weighted gold ornament or a wooden tomb offering and a full-scale piloted aircraft. No evidence exists for engines, propulsive systems, control mechanisms, or any infrastructure for flight. The cultural context points elsewhere. For the Quimbaya, gold was deeply spiritual, connected to solar deities and the afterlife. Their figurines likely represented powerful natural forces or spirit animals, their forms blending the features of birds, fish, and insects into potent symbolic objects. The aerodynamic shape may have been a happy accident born from observing the efficient forms of flying creatures. The Egyptian bird model was a funerary item, meant to accompany and protect the spirit. Its unusual wing shape might simply be a result of the wood's grain or a stylistic choice that, by chance, aligns with physics. This leads us to the powerful role of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to find familiar patterns in ambiguous stimuli. We live in a world shaped by aviation, so we see airplanes. An artisan 1,000 years ago, living in a world shaped by myth and nature, saw a sacred beetle or a solar bird. The same object can be both a spiritually resonant insect and, coincidentally, an aerodynamically stable shape. This mystery touches on a profound question about the nature of discovery. Could there have been a lost tradition of aerodynamic experimentation, perhaps with kites or simple gliders, that influenced these artistic forms? It is possible, though unproven. More likely, these artifacts represent the brilliant human capacity for abstract observation. Ancient artisans spent lifetimes observing the natural world, the curve of a bird's wing cutting the air, the darting speed of a fish. They internalized these efficient, graceful forms and reproduced them in their art, unconsciously encoding the very principles of lift and stability that nature had perfected. The reflective question is not whether these are models of ancient jets, but something more subtle. What intuitive understanding of the world did these artists possess that allowed them to create forms that still, centuries later, speak the silent language of flight? They remind us that the line between inspired art and applied science can be beautifully thin, and that some truths about our world are written in shapes long before they are written in equations. This convergence of form and function in the ancient world finds a parallel in a different kind of artifact, one not shaped like a machine, but one that may have functioned as a map to the very fabric of the universe. Herodotus wrote of machines that lifted stones into place, but the reality was far more human. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed for Pharaoh Khufu around 2,560 years before the Common Era, is a monument of such staggering scale that its construction methods have sparked debate for millennia. Its core contains over 2 million individual blocks of limestone and granite, each averaging 2.5 tons, with some of the interior granite blocks weighing a staggering 60 to 80 tons. Moving and placing this volume of material with the precision the pyramid displays represents a logistical puzzle that modern engineers still struggle to solve definitively. This is not a mystery of a single lost tool, but of an entire vanished system, a symphony of quarrying, transport, and placement conducted on a scale that dwarfs most modern construction projects. The process began in quarries across the river. Workers used copper chisels and stone hammers to cut channels around a desired block, then inserted wooden wedges. Soaking the wedges with water caused them to expand, cleanly splitting the stone from the bedrock. But how do you move an 80-ton granite slab from Aswan, over 500 miles south, to the Giza Plateau? The Nile River provided the answer. During the annual inundation, when floodwaters reached their peak, these colossal stones could be loaded onto specially built barges and floated much closer to the building site. Once on land, the most likely method involved a combination of brute force and brilliant physics. Recent archaeological discoveries at a quarry in Hatnub have revealed a well-preserved ramp system with staircases and post holes. This supports the long-held theory that massive sleds pulled by large teams of workers were the primary hauling technology. The real secret may have been in what they put under the sled. A wall painting in the tomb of Jehutehotep shows a colossal statue being moved on a sled, with a worker pouring liquid in front of the runners. Experiments by materials scientists have shown that wetting the sand in front of a sled dramatically reduces friction, making it possible for a team of reasonable size to pull an immense weight. It was a simple, elegant solution using the desert's most abundant resource. The alignment of the pyramid, however, reveals a different kind of genius. Its base is almost a perfect square, with sides aligned to the cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree. This accuracy in aligning to true north, achieved without magnetic compasses, suggests a profound astronomical understanding. Researchers like archaeoastronomer Kate Spence proposed the Egyptians used a method called simultaneous transit, observing the circumpolar stars, specifically Mizar and Kochab in the Little Dipper, as they rotated around the celestial pole. By marking where these stars rose and set on the horizon, they could establish a near-perfect north-south line. The internal passageways, such as the descending and ascending corridors, are also precisely angled, some pointing toward significant stars like Sirius or the pole star of the era, reinforcing the structure's role as a cosmic machine for the pharaoh's rebirth. The societal organization behind this feat was its own kind of technology. Contrary to old tales of slave labor, archaeological evidence from workers' villages at Giza shows they were skilled, well-fed laborers who rotated in and out of service. This was a national project that unified the country, employing tens of thousands in a carefully managed system of labor gangs, each with its own name and pride. The knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and logistics was likely held by a small, elite class of priests and architects, transmitted orally and through apprenticeship. This is why, when the centralized power of the Old Kingdom fragmented, the ability to build on such a scale and with such precision faded. Later pyramids are smaller and less accurately built. The reflective question is profound. What specific, hands-on techniques for siting, leveling, and coordinating thousands of workers were so dependent on that stable, unified state that they could not survive its passing? The Great Pyramid stands not just as a tomb, but as the ultimate artifact of a lost operational science, a peak of achievement that subsequent generations in Egypt itself could not replicate. It forces us to ask if the greatest technologies are not just about materials and mechanics, but about the invisible architecture of human cooperation and shared purpose, a framework far more fragile than stone. 17 monolithic faces gaze from the jungle floor with an expression of serene, eternal authority. The Olmec colossal heads, carved from single blocks of volcanic basalt between 1400 and 400 years before the Common Era, are the defining masterpieces of Mesoamerica's first great civilization. Scattered across sites in the swampy lowlands of the Mexican Gulf Coast, these sculptures tower over the landscape, some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing as much as 50 tons. Each one is a portrait of unique individuality, with broad features, full lips, and eyes that seem to hold a distant, commanding focus. They wear what appear to be close-fitting helmets, often decorated with distinctive emblems, leading scholars to believe they represent powerful Olmec rulers, immortalized not as gods, but as formidable individuals who commanded both labor and loyalty. The sheer physicality of these heads is the first layer of their mystery. The basalt used did not come from the soft riverine soil where they were found. It was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, dozens of miles away, through a landscape of swamps, rivers, and dense jungle. The Olmec accomplished this without wheels, without metal tools, and without the aid of draft animals like horses or oxen, which were absent from the Americas at the time. The transportation of these multi-ton stones represents a logistical puzzle of the highest order, a testament to a vanished engineering and organizational science. How did they move a 50-ton block of stone across such challenging terrain? While no Olmec manual survives, archaeologists and engineers piecing together the evidence propose a likely combination of methods that required immense communal effort. The first step was at the quarry, where workers likely used stone hammers to fracture the basalt along natural fissures, prying out a rough, multi-ton block. From there, the most plausible theory involves a phased journey. To traverse the land, they may have used a system of log rollers and wooden sledges. Teams of hundreds would have slowly inched the stone forward, constantly moving the rollers from the back to the front in a rhythmic, coordinated push. For river crossings or long-distance transport, the stones could have been loaded onto massive rafts during the rainy season, when water levels were high, and floated along river networks closer to their final destinations. The organizational scale implied is staggering. This was not the work of a few villagers, but of a complex society capable of mobilizing and feeding large workforces for projects that served a central political vision. The heads themselves, once erected in ceremonial plazas at centers like La Venta and San Lorenzo, were more than art. They were statements of power, permanent declarations of a ruler's authority, and the community's collective ability to reshape the very earth in his honor. Their discovery by modern archaeologists was a slow revelation, as the heads were often found partially buried or toppled, reclaimed by the relentless jungle. Preservation is an ongoing challenge in the humid, tropical climate, where vegetation and erosion constantly threaten the stone surfaces. The tradition of carving these colossal portraits ceased around 400 years before the Common Era, coinciding with the decline of major Olmec centers. The reasons for this societal transformation are still debated, possibly involving environmental changes, internal conflict, or shifting trade networks. With that decline, the specific knowledge of how to orchestrate such monumental transport projects, the exact songs, signals, and techniques that moved mountains, faded into silence. In a fascinating modern echo, experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate the process. In the 1960s, a team led by archaeologist Matthew Sterling attempted to move a concrete replica of a head using only Olmec-era tools and techniques, an endeavor that required a huge crew and demonstrated the sheer physical difficulty involved. Such experiments give us a glimpse of the sweat and coordination required, but they can never fully capture the cultural drive, the shared belief system that made such an immense task not only possible but necessary. This leads us to a pair of reflective questions that get to the heart of the Olmec achievement. What sophisticated social contract, what shared vision of order and leadership enabled the mobilization of entire communities for these projects? And what specific innovations in rope making, in path finding, or in the psychology of mass labor management disappeared when that vision changed? The colossal heads are silent sentinels of a lost social technology, proving that before you can move a mountain of stone, you must first move the human heart and will. Stone can be made to flow like lava under a heat more intense than a pottery kiln. Scattered across the windswept hills of Scotland and parts of France stand the enigmatic remains of vitrified forts, Iron Age strongholds where sections of their stone walls have been transformed into a dark, glassy slag. This is not simple charring from a fire, but a fundamental metamorphosis. The very rock has been melted and fused, a process called vitrification, requiring sustained temperatures in excess of 1,100 degrees Celsius. Sites like Tap O Noth in Scotland or Peyron in France present archaeologists with a silent, scorched puzzle, walls that look as if a dragon breathed upon them, leaving stone frozen in a state between solid and liquid. The phenomenon is rare, found in only about 70 of the thousands of hill forts across Europe, which makes its occurrence all the more mysterious. How, and more perplexingly why, would Iron Age communities around 600 to 300 years before the Common Era subject their own defensive walls to such infernal heat? One leading theory points to a desperate, final act of destruction. When a fort was captured by enemies, the victors might have systematically burned it, not just with a passing torch, but by piling massive amounts of timber and sod directly against the stone ramparts. This would create a kiln-like effect, with the earthen sod acting as insulation to contain and intensify the heat, baking the stone from the inside out. The goal may have been to render the fortress permanently uninhabitable and symbolically annihilate the power of the defeated chieftain, a form of ritualized ruination that left a permanent scar on the landscape. Yet, other researchers propose the vitrification could have been intentional from the start, a form of primitive cementing. The idea is that builders might have stacked timber lattices within the stone walls and then set them alight, hoping the resulting fusion would create a stronger, more monolithic barrier. Modern experiments have tested this hypothesis. Teams have constructed small-scale walls of stone and wood, set them ablaze, and succeeded in creating localized vitrification. However, these experiments also reveal the immense difficulty, showing that controlling such a fire to evenly strengthen a large wall, rather than simply burning it down, would have been extraordinarily risky and hard to manage. The strategic locations of these forts add another layer. They are often situated on prominent hilltops, places naturally exposed to the elements, including lightning. This has led to a fascinating natural counter-theory. Could some instances of vitrification be the result of a catastrophic lightning strike? When lightning hits rock, it can instantly generate temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, creating a fulgurate, a glassy tube where the electrical charge fused the sand or stone. While this can explain small, localized glass formations, it seems insufficient to account for the extensive, continuous vitrification seen along long stretches of ramparts at sites like Tap O Noth. The silence of history on this practice is deafening. Roman historians who wrote extensively about the Celtic tribes they encountered never mention witnessing or describing such a dramatic firing of stone fortifications. This absence suggests the technology, if it was one, was either so rare it escaped notice or had already ceased by the time of Roman contact. Early modern antiquarians, upon first encountering these glassy ruins, spun wilder tales, speculating about ancient warfare wielding unknown heat weapons or even invoking myths of giants who could melt rock with their breath. Today, geologists and archaeologists use tools like thermoluminescence dating and microscopic analysis to study the slag, reading the mineral composition like a recipe of heat and time. Their work confirms the temperatures involved were far beyond those of a typical house fire, so we are left with two reflective questions as we conclude our journey through these 20 vanished technologies. What precise, hands-on pyrotechnic knowledge did these Iron Age communities possess, allowing them to harness and direct fire on an almost industrial scale, even if only for destruction? And why did this dramatic, landscape-altering practice not spread, not become a recorded technique of war or construction, but instead vanish, leaving only these eerie, glass-strewn ruins as its sole testament. The Vitrified Forts stand as a final, smoldering monument to a forgotten chapter in humanity's relationship with elemental force, a technology that seems to have emerged from necessity, burned brightly in its destructive purpose, and then was itself consumed by the ashes of time. These 20 mysteries, from celestial computers to self-healing concrete, are not isolated curiosities but fragments of a single, sobering story. They reveal recurring patterns in how brilliant knowledge vanishes, patterns that hold urgent lessons for our own technological age. A common thread is the fragility of knowledge transmitted orally or held within small, specialized groups. The exact forging rhythm for Damascus Steel, the secret formula for Greek fire, the precise astronomical alignments for pyramid construction, these were not written in manuals but lived in the hands and minds of masters. When those masters passed without apprentices, or when the guilds that supported them dissolved, the technology died with them. This vulnerability is compounded during periods of societal stress. Historian Joseph Tainter's work on the collapse of complex societies highlights how during decline, specialized skills are often the first to be lost as social structures fragment and resources are redirected to immediate survival. The intricate logistics needed to build a Sacsayhuamán or move an Olmec head depended on a stable, centralized authority capable of organizing thousands. When that authority crumbled, the organizational technology vanished, even if the physical stones remained. Another powerful theme is the role of secrecy and resource dependency. Some technologies, like Greek fire, were lost because they were too successfully guarded, their secrets so compartmentalized that a single break in the chain meant total loss. Others, like the rust-resistant iron of the Delhi pillar, may have relied on specific, localized materials or processes that became inaccessible when trade routes shifted or mines were exhausted. The disappearance of the Nazca Lines as a cultural practice reminds us that technology is deeply entwined with belief systems. When the spiritual imperative faded, the monumental effort ceased. This interdisciplinary understanding is where modern archaeology shines, merging materials science, astronomy, linguistics, and engineering to read these silent artifacts. It is a collaborative detective story where a geologist's analysis of Roman concrete slag can inspire sustainable architects, and an aerodynamicist's test of a gold figurine can reshape our view of ancient observation. This pursuit also raises profound ethical questions. Should we attempt to fully recreate a lost technology, like Greek fire or a functional Antikythera mechanism? While such projects drive discovery, they force us to consider the intent behind the original creation and the potential consequences of reviving it. More often, the goal is not replication but inspiration. The study of Roman concrete is now directly influencing the development of modern, self-healing, low-carbon building materials, turning an ancient recipe into a solution for a future crisis. These ancient puzzles thus become a wellspring of innovation, proving that the past is not a closed book but a library of untested ideas. This brings us to two reflective questions that bridge millennia. In our digital era, where we believe we preserve everything, how can we better safeguard our own foundational knowledge? We store data on formats that become obsolete within decades, and our most advanced systems depend on global supply chains and rare earth minerals just as fragile as ancient trade routes. What essential skills or understandings are we losing today without even realizing it? Perhaps because they reside in aging experts or in analog practices we deem outdated. The silent stones and corroded gears of history urge us to look beyond mere storage, to value the living transmission of hands-on skill, the maintenance of diverse knowledge systems, and the societal stability that allows innovation to flourish across generations. They teach us that preservation is not a passive act of storage, but an active, continuous commitment to understanding context, and the human connections that keep knowledge alive. The final artifact has been examined, but the true story is just beginning. Our journey through these 20 unexplained technologies is not a list of curiosities. It is a single, resonant lesson written in stone, metal, and silence. Each vanished marvel, from the Antikythera Mechanism's clockwork stars to the self-healing chemistry of Roman concrete, forces a fundamental shift in perspective. History is not a straight, inevitable line of progress leading to us. It is a vast, branching tree, and we have only ever seen one limb. Entire branches of human ingenuity have grown, borne fruit, and then fallen away, their secrets returning to the soil. This is a humbling realization, one that replaces arrogance with awe and invites a deeper, more respectful curiosity about the people who came before us. They were not primitive, they were problem solvers facing their own world with brilliant, context-specific creativity. The loss of their knowledge is our collective inheritance of mystery, a series of open questions that continue to shape science, engineering, and history today. This is why these stories matter far beyond the thrill of the puzzle. They are case studies in the fragility of knowledge itself. We saw how technologies can disappear when they are held too closely, like the state secret of Greek fire, or when the social structures that sustain them crumble, as with the Inca's stone-fitting mastery at Sacsayhuamán. They vanish when trade routes for special materials are cut, when oral traditions are broken, or when a cultural practice loses its spiritual imperative, leaving wonders like the Nazca Lines as messages without a codebook. In our own digital age, we face a paradoxical version of this same risk. We believe we preserve everything, storing vast libraries of data on formats that may be unreadable in 50 years. Our most advanced systems depend on global networks and rare resources that are just as vulnerable as ancient supply chains. The silent stones and corroded gears of the past ask us a vital question. What essential skills or deep understandings are we in danger of losing today, simply because we assume a hard drive is a permanent record? The lesson is clear: preservation is not passive storage, it is the active, living transmission of context, skill, and meaning. The hopeful counterpoint to all this loss is the enduring power of rediscovery and inspiration. Modern researchers are not just solving ancient puzzles, they are being inspired by them to solve modern problems. The study of Roman concrete is directly influencing the development of new, sustainable, and self-healing building materials to combat climate change. Analysis of Damascus Steel's nanostructure informs advanced metallurgy. Even failed decipherments, like the ongoing work on the Voynich Manuscript, drive innovations in cryptography and linguistic analysis. These ancient enigmas are a wellspring of innovation, proving that the past is a library of untested ideas waiting for a new reader. So, as we close this exploration, let these 20 mysteries stand not as endpoints but as invitations. Which of these lost technologies sparks your imagination the most? Does the celestial ambition of the Antikythera Mechanism call to you, or the communal will that walked the Moai across Easter Island? Share your thoughts and reflections, for it is in this shared curiosity that the legacy of these innovations truly lives on. The quest for understanding is a continuous thread, connecting the artisan who carved the first Quimbaya figurine to the aerodynamics expert testing it millennia later. Every mystery solved reveals 10 more, and in that endless, humbling pursuit, we honor the ingenuity of our ancestors while building a more thoughtful, resilient future. The echoes of lost technologies remind us that the story of human creativity is never fully told, and its next chapter is always being written.